Hey guys, it's History Behind the Warrior, and welcome to another Soul Calibur video. Now I do apologize that this video has taken quite some time to come out. As many of you do know, I've been quite ill recently post E3, but since last week's video there's actually been quite a bit of Soul Calibur news to actually come out, especially one that regards the story and some important details surrounding this. Now first off, let's actually talk about what is exactly going on with the story, because there's been a lot of people, including myself, saying that it's a reboot, and a lot of people saying it's been a prequel, and it's a little bit of both. It's quite an interesting take on what we know. Outside of all the stuff we've seen within the trailer, we've actually learned from last week that the main story and premise will actually be taking place between the first Soul Calibur game and the second Soul Calibur game, so it's not directly in itself an entire reboot of the timeline. However, it does seem like they're taking characters from later installments, such as Zuslamel, and incorporating who they are much earlier into the game's storyline. But how exactly are they doing this? As it's quite an interesting and bold take on the story, since it does seem like they're kind of reinventing it for a newer generation, where the incorporation of the Soul Chronicles has really kind of allowed them to open up a lot of opportunities. It's a very large timeline ranging from the events of the original Soul Edge game that stretches out roughly up until the very beginning of Soul Calibur 2. Of course, we don't have all the details quite yet, so we don't know whether or not the game will kind of spill a little bit over into there, but we have seen in the trailers small snippets and recreations of important moments within the series, the most important one being when Siegfried picks up Soul Edge for the first time. So it seems like the main story of this game will be taking place between the first Soul Calibur game and the second Soul Calibur game, but the Soul Chronicle timeline as a whole will seemingly allow you to play previous events within the storyline and see how they build up to the current and main storyline of the game, which is a very interesting take and really a great way of kind of reintroducing these characters to individuals who weren't familiar with the original game, since the original Soul Edge game came out in 1995 and the first Soul Calibur game debuted in 1998. So it's been a very long time since anyone's kind of explored these characters' origins. So the creation of the Soul Chronicles will allow us to actually retread old steps and to become a little bit more familiar with characters we may have forgotten about. Now, judging from what I have seen, not a lot of these will be full-blown animated story sequences. Instead, it looks like they're going to be taking it back and kind of paying homage to the older games of the series and having it be done in a storyboard style, which I myself am personally fine with as long as it takes place outside of the main story, because a lot of people weren't happy about this similar idea in Soul Calibur 5, where a lot of the story was simply art stills instead of actual full-blown animated sequences. We saw a very similar thing happen in Tekken 7, where there was very flat voice acting and a very unnecessary subplot involving a journalist, I believe. So I believe if they've learned any criticism from Tekken 7 and Soul Calibur 5, is that an overwhelming amount of these stories shouldn't have art stills to cover the entire sequence, as it can be seen as lazy and rather cheap. However, we don't have a lot of information to go on this by, so I'm hoping they've listened to some of the criticism and have decided to apply some changes of how they are telling the story, as like I said, we do see some sequences from the story trailer. Now here's where things get quite interesting. Akubo has recently stated that there will be an additional single player mode, despite the release date not being too far from where we are right now. Now the additional single player content of Soul Calibur games has always been extremely good, so I'm interested to see what this new single player mode will be. I personally believe that's going to be a reinvented version of the Weapon Master mode from Soul Calibur 2. That game mode is widely praised by fans of the series, as it was such a fun additional game mode to an already very polished game. Now what does really interest me is that they haven't shown off to create a character mode just yet, which is yes something they've actually confirmed for this game. So the idea of creating your own character and sending them off in this Weapon Master mode would be a great bit of additional content for the player to enjoy, as it would allow us to create our own story with our own characters. Now this in itself is just an idea. For now we just have to wait and see what actually does happen, as we have no information about this additional single player mode and we are yet to hear any details regarding character creation. So I'm interested to see whether or not they'll actually infuse the two into its own single player mode. But yeah, that kind of covers all of the story mode news that has recently dropped post E3. I know this isn't entirely new stuff, but I always like to be kind of accurate with story-esque details, as I think it's fairly safe to say at this point I do enjoy the narrative of fighting games. And Soul Calibur 6 does look extremely promising, especially with its setting, and the opportunity to retread old steps will be a great way of kind of re-establishing this franchise once more, as after Soul Calibur 5 it's kind of dipped out of people's eyes. But of how good the roster is for Soul Calibur 6, as well as how intriguing this story mode is, it looks like we're certainly going to be in store for a very good game. Now whilst we're on the topic of roster, tomorrow I'll be talking about the 10 remaining characters on the roster that I personally believe are going to be in the game, as there have been some leaks of information that more or less confirm particular characters on the roster. So if you are interested, please do keep an eye out for that. And I also do have some very exciting news regarding Soul Calibur, but I'm not allowed to talk about it just yet. So please do keep an eye out for it, and I'll let you all know what it is when we get closer to the date. Now before this video does wrap up, if possible, let's try getting it to about 500 likes. It's a great way of helping out this channel since YouTube's ad system is broken as hell. So by giving it a thumbs up, it helps out a ton. And if you want to go that extra step, we also have a Patreon set up, and a link for it will be down in the description below. Anyway guys, as always, please comment, like, subscribe, and share this video with everyone you know. Please take care, and I'll see you all next time.